Okay, in this video, you're going to learn how to properly set up a song in Ableton. So regardless of how Ableton starts, you can see this is a playlist from the previous week, it looks like. We're actually going to open up a new song that we have never used before so that I can show you how the song is properly set up. So you're going to go to Open and Open Live Set. Then navigate on the left to Ableton. And when the initial files are saved, they just go into this general Ableton folder. The song we're going to work on is How Great Thou Art. So I clicked on that, and now I'm going to open up the Multitrack ALS file into Ableton. I don't need to save any changes. So this is what the file initially looks like. So there's a couple things we need to do to this file to get it ready for use on a particular Sunday. So we're going to come up here to Create, and we want to insert a MIDI track. And we actually want to insert two of them. So you can click on it once and click on it again. And you can see we've got two new MIDI tracks. I'm going to make the top one black. And if I hit Command R, I can rename it. I want to name this track the Markers track. The second track I'm going to recolor white that I created, and I'm going to Command R for rename. And I'm going to name this the Tempo track. I want the Markers track to be at the top, and so I just clicked and dragged it up. And Tempo track is going to be right after Markers, so I clicked and dragged it up to where I wanted it to be. Now the next thing we need to figure out is we're going to, if you look at the top, you have these flags, count in, intro, verse 1, chorus. So what we need to do is we need to create markers that correspond to those labels, except for we want the markers to start one measure prior to the flag labels, because that corresponds to when the guide cues say verse or chorus or breakdown. So that way you'll know where you're at when rehearsal and Sunday service is happening. If you click at the beginning of the marker, it gives people the audio guide cue for the section they're about to play and one measure prior to them actually playing it, so they'll be ready when the time comes. So the next thing we need to do is we're going to program these markers in, but we need to listen to the audio track to see how far we need to zoom in so that we can click on a grid line and have that be one measure prior to each section. And it will also correspond to when the guide cues happen. So let's take a listen. 1, 2, intro, 2, 3. Okay, so intro lined up with this grid line, and let's just make sure verse lines up with this grid line. Verse. Okay, so now we know we have zoomed in or out appropriately. If you need to zoom in more or less, then just hit the plus or minus keys on your keyboard, and they will zoom in and out, just like this. Zoom in, zoom out, plus, minus. Okay, so now we know we can begin to create these markers. So what you're going to do is you're going to click from this grid mark, and you're going to drag until where you want it to stop. So if I click and hold and drag over, this is where I want my first marker to be. And if I hold Shift Command M, it's going to create a marker section. You can also go up here and you can see that Shift Command M, once you've dragged and selected a section of the song, it says Insert MIDI Clip. So that's what we just did. We inserted this MIDI clip, and now we're going to Command R and rename it. And the section that we're in right here is called Intro. So we just type that in, and now we go to the next section. So one measure prior to intro to one measure prior to the next section, verse 1. This is also an intro again. So Shift Command M. Command R to rename, label this intro again. So we just continue. This is going to be verse 1. Shift Command M, Command R, verse 1. We've got a chorus, so we'll put in the chorus. Shift Command M, Command R, and we'll label this one chorus. Then we have interlude. That's pretty short. Shift Command M, Command R, type in interlude. We have verse 2. We have a chorus. Click and drag. Shift Command M, Command R. Chorus. Now up here, you can when the icon turns to a magnifying glass, you can click and hold and drag to the right, so you can see more of what you're doing. Next section is interlude. So again, we're going one measure prior to each section for the labels of these things. And the reason that we do this is because when you copy these songs into a playlist for a Sunday, the flags don't come with it. The flags are only there in the initial file. Once you drag this song into a playlist for Sunday that has multiple songs, the only flags that will appear are if you open whatever song that you initially open. Once you drag in more songs, the flags don't come with them. So we always program these markers in. Now I know it's hard to see this section up here, but that actually says vamp, and it only lasts for one measure, so that's why we're only going to put the marker for the one measure prior, because here is one measure prior to the chorus. So Shift Command M, Command R. I don't think it took. Another way you can rename if you want is right click, and you can find, should be, I'm not seeing it. There's rename somewhere. Anyway, shortcuts, we'll just, okay, and it deleted itself. Let's try that again. Shift Command M, Command R, label. And the label might not show up just because we have, here we go. Now it says rename, so maybe I just had to zoom in. Let's zoom back out so that we get the proper zoom ratio. Okay, next section, chorus. Shift Command M, Command R. Type in chorus. So learning these keyboard shortcuts actually makes it faster. You can also, if you wanted to, you can, if you click and go Command C for copy, and then put the cursor where you want to paste and hit Command V, it will paste it. So if you have repeating sections, sometimes it's faster to do that. It's hard to see again, but this section here is actually tag. So we'll see if it lets us. I don't think it did. So it does not let us rename unless you're have zoomed in more, apparently. There's an outro. And here is the ending. So last one of these we have to do. Okay, we've got all our markers in there. Now the next thing we need to do is put in the tempo, or configure the tempo. The reason for doing that is because even though currently Ableton knows what tempo the song is supposed to be, once you drag in multiple songs back to back, you have to have some way of telling Ableton what tempo the new song is once the playhead gets to that song and it starts playing it. Otherwise, all the songs will be in the same tempo. So that's why we create these tempo tracks, so that when we combine multiple songs, Ableton knows what tempo to automatically switch to for that particular song. Now, before we get into this, there's something that we always want to check for, and it has to do down here with this master track, because sometimes these songs aren't at a consistent tempo. They'll speed up or slow down in certain sections, and we want to check what it's doing before we do that. So in order to check and see if the song has any tempo automation, is we'll click this master file here and make sure that the arrow is down so we can see what's inside of it. And then we want to make sure that this automation mode button, which looks like two dots connected by a diagonal line up here, is activated. And if there were any tempo automations, what you would see here is a solid red line, and it would be going up and down and over to adjust for all the tempo changes that the song has. It's important to remember to check for that because there's some additional steps that you would need to take in order to correctly program the tempo track. If there are red lines down here going up and down, changing the tempo, then what you would need to do is you would need to click on the click track and make sure that you can minimize that master so you can see all the tracks. You would need to click on the click track, then go to the last track, hit shift and click. So that selects everything. And what you would do is you would come over to where it says warp, and you would need to turn warp on. And once you turn warp on, what that's going to do is it's going to allow all of these tracks to play at a certain consistent tempo and not lengthen or shorten. Because without the tracks warped, if you try to change the tempo, the tracks are either going to get longer or they're going to get shorter. The problem with them doing that is since we've created these markers up here, according to these flags, well, if these tracks change by shifting left and right, our markers are no longer where they need to be, and we don't know where the song sections are. So that's why once the markers are programmed, these tracks need to stay no longer or no shorter, so that in the audio they match up with where we have labeled them with the tracks. Now, since this particular song down in the master doesn't have anything, we don't have to warp these. So we're on to creating our tempo track. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to come over to the left, and we're going to scroll until we see this tempo folder, and we're going to expand it by clicking the arrow. And you can see this little audio file. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to click back in the window. I'm going to hit the minus so that we can zoom out all the way so we can see the entire song. And I'm going to click on this audio AIF file, and I'm just going to drag it and put it at the very beginning of the song. And then when my arrow turns to a right bracket, I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to drag all the way to the end of the song. I'm going to right-click, recolor it white, and then hit Command R to relabel what this says. And what I want it to say is I want it to say the beats per minute of the song, so the tempo of the song, and I also want it to say the time signature, just so that I know what this song is supposed to be. So I'm just going to type in 58 and 4/4. 58, comma, space, 4/4. How I got that was when Ableton initially opened this file, it knew what tempo and time signature it was, and it puts those up here. So I know this song is supposed to be 58 beats per minute, and it's supposed to be in 4/4 time, so I just label this track as that in case there's any question later on when we're dragging multiple songs into a set list. We will know what tempo and time signature the track is supposed to be at. So now we're going to come down to the inspector window, so we'll make sure that we have actually selected the tempo track. And down here where it says segment BPM, we want this to match what the song is actually supposed to be. So we're just going to click in the box, type in 58, hit enter, and now this tempo track is set to 58 beats per minute. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to make the tempo track the master or the leader instead of a follower, because right now it says follower in this gray box underneath warp, and we want that to say leader, so all we have to do is click, and now we have told Ableton that this tempo track is the leader for this song. So when the playhead hits the beginning of this track, it is going to send a command to Master Ableton up here to tell it, I want you to play this song at 58 beats per minute. Now, it already says 58 up here because, again, when we opened this song first, it already knew to play it at that tempo. But once we start playing different songs back to back with different tempos, Ableton's not going to know what tempo to play that song at unless something tells it to switch to a particular tempo. And that's what this tempo track does. It tells Ableton to switch to 58 beats per minute. Now, one thing it does not do is it does not tell Ableton to switch to 4/4. This is just a label. We just type this in. These numbers don't communicate with Ableton. The 58 that gets typed into this segment BPM communicates with Ableton. But these numbers don't, which means that 4/4 also does not communicate with Ableton. So we labeled it so that we know that the song is in 4/4. And if it happened to be the case that we are coming off of a song that's in 3/4 or 6/8 or some other time signature, I know that when we get to this song, we need it to be in 4/4. So what I would do is I would come up to this section of the Ableton window, kind of where the cursor turns into a speaker, and if you right click, I think this is in the way. Let's see if I move it. Yeah. If we right click, we can insert a time signature change. Now, we don't need to do that in this view because Ableton is already set to 4/4 and it doesn't matter for just creating a song. So I'll show you how to do this better once we get to building set lists. But it involves coming up here, right-clicking, and inserting a time signature change if the previous song is different than what we need this song's time signature to be. So we've created our markers track, we've created our tempo track. Now we can minimize these windows, make it look pretty. We can see all of our tracks here. The next thing we need to do is we need to configure the audio outputs. So how we're going to do that is we need to make sure that Ableton, initially, you're going to want Mac Mini speakers in and out, and the reason for that is so when you program the markers, you can just hear from the computer what they're supposed to be. It makes it simple. But now that we are going to configure the audio for our Dante network, we have to change it. So to get to this window, again, I went to Live up here in Preferences, and it's under the Audio tab. And audio output device, we need to reconfigure for Dante Virtual Sound Card. And then we can close that window. Then up here on the top right, there's 3 horizontal lines and 3 vertical lines. We need to switch to the vertical lines mode. This is called Ableton Session View. And we're going to configure all of our outputs. So the first output we care about is the click track. The markers and the tempo tracks are MIDI tracks, so they're not actually generating audio. They're just generating MIDI cues. So the first audio track we have is always the click track. And if you come down to audio 2, that says where do you want the audio for this track to go to? We want it to go to an external out, and we're going to set it to track number 1. We're using 10 audio buses to send to our audio mixer. So this is how we have them divided out. So click and guide are both external out 1, drums is 3 and 4, percussion's 3 and 4, loops 3 and 4, all the percussion stuff, drums, percussion, loops, always 3 and 4. Bass is number 2. The reason why it's 2 is because everything gets processed 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. You can't do even and an odd on a stereo channel. And so that's why we have to wait until we get to the next mono channel to use up the 2 out of the set of 1 and 2. So bass is going to go 2, acoustic, all your guitars are going to go 5 and 6. So acoustics, all these electric guitars, all 5 and 6. And keys is 7 and 8, so external out, and then 7 and 8. Multiple keys channels here. Strings, consider that keys. Now the next thing we need to do is there's more tracks here. So I clicked on this little black bar. It's kind of hard to see, but you click and drag and it scrolls to the right, so you actually reach the end of what you have. And we are going to set the background vocals. So now we're not in keys anymore, we're vocals. So that's 9 and 10. So all your vocals are 9 and 10. Now once we have all those set, the last thing you have to do on this page is you come over to where it says Cue Out. Cue Out is Ableton's internal click track that you can activate. And so we need to tell this that to go to channel 1 because we told the other click tracking guide cues to go to channel 1. So if we're using Ableton's internal one, we'll also want that to go to the same place. So now that we have all of our audio configured, that's the only thing we need this page for. We can go back to the other page. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to turn off the channels that we typically use on a Sunday that typically we have playing live. So we typically have a drummer, we normally have a bass player, we normally have an acoustic guitar player. Now I'll let the electric guitar player wait until he gets here to tell us, oh, today I'm going to play electric guitar part 2. And so then during the service you can turn whichever part off, but I typically leave them all on. And we normally have a piano player, so I'll take the piano out. I'll leave everything else on. And now you're going to want to test this. So in order to test it, you're going to take a look at the audio mixer. And if you select Mix 1 on the right-hand side, I know you can't see it in the video, but if you select Mix 1 on the audio mixer and then select the PAFL button in the master channel strip and hit play, you will be able to hear the click and the guide and everything that in-ear monitor person number 1 is going to hear. And that all you're just checking for is just making sure that the audio actually worked. So you're probably not going to hear any audio being recorded right now because it's routed differently. And we've already switched Ableton to Dante mode, so you're not going to hear any audio coming from the Mac Mini speakers. Okay, so we've successfully programmed a song that is ready for Sunday.